I was ripped out of my body, not in a painful way, but in a fast way, like bungee cord fast, turned around, facing my body and the ladder suspended in the air, like a freeze frame in a movie. We know that about 80% of people who have near-death experiences come back with heightened ESP, psychic abilities, mediumship. It's almost like you can't be that close and touch it and not come back a changed person. Well, I like to say, I think we can do things in life the easy way or the hard way. And for some reason, I was going to do it the hard way, I guess. But I think the universe had been tapping me on my shoulder and wanting to get my attention for decades at that point in my life. We have an energy body that surrounds our physical human body. And as that carries that wound for decades or however long it's been, because you've decided not to talk about it, not to address it, try to forget about it, it starts to create a physical ailment. Yes, your loved one is spirit, but they are not sitting alone on a park bench waiting for you for the next 50 years. They are living, evolving, loving, laughing, and they want us to do the same thing while we're here.
All right, welcome to the Evolving Potential Podcast. This is episode number 22. Today I have on the show Michelle Clare. Michelle has had 3 near-death experiences that have dramatically changed her life. She's become a highly sought-out and certified medium, an energetic healer, and life coach. She does public speaking events and private readings. Michelle helps people who have lost a loved one, helps them to find peace and understanding. She's been validated as a high-caliber medium by providing specific and accurate information, and even uses her abilities to work as a research medium for the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So I'm very excited to interview her for multiple reasons, as you can see, and her story will definitely astonish you as we go through it. So thank you for being here, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Todd.
Okay, so I kind of want to jump straight into, almost the results side of things. And so it's like, as you are communicating with people, it would be cool if you could share a story on how you've been able to really help someone overcome this place of grief that they might be stuck in.
Yeah.
Any
absolutely.
Story you might be willing to share.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories has to do with Mother Teresa coming in a reading. And so I was reading for this RN, and she was working full time, had 8 children. Her mother was in hospice, at the end of stages of life. And Mother Teresa came in. And during this reading, I was a little surprised. I was like, oh, Mother Teresa's here for you. And she said, well, I worked with her in Calcutta. So she actually had a personal relationship with her. And during that reading, Mother Teresa said to her, she said, I did not lose myself in the process of helping people, because if I had lost myself, I wouldn't have been able to help. And so it was this validation of kind of on the plane, right? We've got to put our oxygen mask on first. It was this validation about loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves to know that there is peace on the other side, and that we're still connected to our loved ones. I mean, that's one of my favorite stories, because I feel like it spans so much information. But in my daily life, in my daily readings, what I love about the situations I'm encountering is I have loved ones from the other side, or life guides or angels coming in, talking to the people who I'm reading about current situations in their life, about what they were just thinking this morning as they drank their coffee, on and on and on. So what it's showing is that our loved ones in spirit, our angels and our life guide, are actually connected to us right here, right now, in this very present moment.
That is crazy. Thoughts from this morning. Wow.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've all kind of seen the scenes in movies where everyone's, wrapped around in a circle, holding hands, and there's like a medium doing the reading. And so what does that look like in the modern world? And what you're doing?
Right. Nothing like that at all. No, that's funny. No, usually most of my readings now are on Zoom. So I have clients around the world. So the way that this works is that actually we just log on at the same time. I set the intention that their loved ones, their angels, their life guides are going to come through with messages from that for them, and we log on to Zoom. And because once we're in spirit, we are not stuck in a location like we are in our human body. I can only be in one place at a time. their loved ones and their angels are coming through and giving messages to me and to them on the other side of the Zoom screen. So it doesn't matter. There's no such thing as time and place and space when you're in the etheric realm.
No, that makes perfect sense. And do you find often that you struggle to get people to believe?
Actually, no, I don't. This is kind of how I see it. It's not my job to make anyone believe. If they come to me and they're skeptical, their loved ones, their angels, their life guides need to give them the evidence that they want or need to help them get through life. But I let go of the worry of convincing people of who I am years ago. If I had, I wouldn't be where I am today. And really most of the people that come to me aren't skeptical. I'm a certified medium, so I've been blindly studied. They've tested me, they've scored me. So I know that the information that I'm getting is accurate, and my sitters do too. They're really drawn to me more on the vibrational frequency of, I know this is real, and how can you help me with it?
Yeah. So then what was the journey of beginning to share this and kind of dealing with some of the emotions around, before you had overcome this, I don't really care what people think-ness?
Yeah, that was the hard part, right? Because it really came to a point where I did lose family and I did lose friends over honoring my path and who I am. And so I had to get to the point where I was ready to come out of the closet. The other thing is, I don't think those people are on a wrong path. They're allowed to be skeptical. They're allowed to, I don't actually take it personally at all, because it's really just a representation of them and their limiting belief pattern. It really has nothing to do with me, and that's okay. So it was really a challenge, though, to give myself permission to honor completely who I was. I was in a marriage where it wasn't really honored or thought of well. It was kind of like a secret. And so, so my 25-year marriage ended in divorce because it really got to the point where I had to choose my marriage and him, or I had to choose honoring myself.
Wow. And so was it the third near-death experience that you had was really the one that kind of allowed that to start to happen, allowed to I need to come out more. This is becoming more obvious. This is not meshing with me to keep it a secret anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. The third one, it really was. Do you want me to tell you about it in detail, or do you want me to
you can start from the first one now. I wanted to make sure we kind of got into some of the stuff that you do, so people can have some clarity before we get into things you've gone through. But yeah, I'd love to hear about it from the beginning even.
Yeah. So when I was 12, my grandfather passed away, and I started noticing at that point in time that he and I were still communicating. So I would tell my mom what he was saying, and she would say, well, that's what you think he would say if he was still here. But I knew he was still saying it. So we had a communication and a relationship, but I realized nobody else in the family was doing that. So I kind of just kept it to myself. And then what happened was in the year of 2000, so in April 2000, this is my first near-death experience. I was actually at a hospital in Tucson, Arizona, because my sister-in-law was giving birth. So I was in the hallway talking to her RN, who was my friend from high school, as the universe sets things up like that. And I ended up having this massive seizure, and I'd never had one before. I've never had one since. But what I remember is opening my eyes, and I was laying with my head in my grandma's lap. And I remember looking up at her. I remember her looking like the most young, beautiful version of her that I could remember. I remember feeling the timelessness, this blissful space. I was in no hurry to go anywhere. And as I was looking at my grandma, I looked up next to her, and there was this beautiful 12-foot angel standing next to her. And I remember just being almost drawn and sucked into her energy. And so as I was looking at her, I thought, I want to see her feather wings. So, I moved my eyes to see her feather wings. And what I found is they were actually made of light, not feathers the way we envision them here on Earth. They seemed to just span eternity. With that being said, I thought in my head, what is your name? And she answered me telepathically. She said, my name's Madeline, and I'm one of your guardian angels. And at that moment, I was surprised because I didn't know anything about telepathic communication. But I knew she heard me, and I was just laying there enjoying this blissful space. And the next thing I know, I hear them yelling, code, code, code. because I was in the hospital and I had quit breathing, they were calling the code team. And so they were already on their way. The next thing I know, I'm back in my body. It feels heavy. It feels dense. It feels like my arm weighs 500 pounds. But the reality is that situation that I experienced was more vibrant than my daily life or even this podcast that we're doing right now.
And that's so crazy to me because you mentioned timelessness, which I know, this is not necessarily something you're interested in, but I'm very interested in flow state. And so that's always described as timeless. And so it's like this spiritual experience and this timeless. And I just thought that was like really cool. And so what must, and the same thing with psychedelics too, being described as like, once you're able to get past the veil, if you will, it feels more vivid and more real than anything you've ever experienced. And so you came back here, and I guess what would be the thing that would differentiate that from a dream? I know that's a hard question to answer perhaps, but I'm curious.
Well, it's more solid and it's more real. A dream has a different, even like when you wake up in the morning, a dream has a different energy than what you're cooking for breakfast because it feels more solid what you're making for breakfast, right? I'm getting out the pot or the pan and so there's an energy around it. So what makes it more real than a dream? Because I have had dreams. Dreams have what I would say almost a distant energy to them, whereas the near-death experience is all-encompassing and it's right here, right now.
Wow. And so then you came back and did you feel changed already from that? Was that was a mind-blowing, I'll never be the same again type experience, or what was that like for you?
Yeah. So at that point in my life, I was newly married and I didn't have kids. And I did not know the term near-death experience. So I knew I had had this very vivid experience, but I didn't know exactly what it was. So I kind of came back. I took a couple weeks before I told anyone about it. And then I just kind of like shoved it back behind me and kept moving forward. I realized I now had connection with angels, that there is more. I knew what I had felt, but I did not have words to describe it. And I had no idea that it was a near-death experience.
That's crazy. And so then at some point, you're living a fairly normal life at this time. You're not a medium yet. And then you have a second one?
Yep. So by the time I have my second one, that one happens in May 2006. And at that point in time, I have three young kids. I'm still married. So I have a 5-year-old, 2.5-year-old, and my infant son, who was 6 weeks old. I had a lot of complications during his delivery. So for about 4 of the following 6 weeks after I had him, I was still in the hospital. And finally, they decided that they wanted to do a D&C, which is a procedure where they clear out your uterus. And they said, you'll be fine after this. You'll be clear. You can go home. It's a 45-minute outpatient procedure. The night before, I had this rock and this pit in my stomach, and I thought I should not do this, but they told me it'd be quick and easy and I'd be done. So I went ahead and I went in. I had had anesthesia before, and whenever I've had it, it's usually just a blank. It's not dreaming. It's not memories. It's just a blank space. So this time I remember counting backwards for the anesthesiologist. And the next thing I know, I look over and my beautiful 102-pound white German Shepherd who had passed a few years ago walked into the operating room, laid her head on my gurney, and we were gone. And we were on this phenomenal beach. And this beach has smells that we don't have here. It has colors that we don't have here. Everything is radiating light and love. Every drop of water, every piece of sand, every leaf, every flower, literally everything is radiating light and love. And so I'm looking at my beautiful dog and I'm noticing like she looks like she's about 2. She's healthy. She's young. We're telepathically communicating. She's happy that I'm there. And we are just running on this beach. And I noticed that we run for a really long time and we don't start to get hot or tired or thirsty. So I start having an awareness, right, that there's something different going on here. With each step and each breath that I took, there was only love. There was only the present moment. I wasn't worried about anything that had ever come before that moment. And I had no worries about anything that was ever going to come after that moment. It was literally the most present I have ever been. And as I was on the beach with her, I felt my son, who was 6 weeks old and at the house with my mom, calling to me. And so I energetically, my soul, it went to him, and he was scared because he knew I was getting ready to leave. I remember saying to him, I'm not going to leave you. I will find a way to stay. And so I started praying, and I started saying, I need help. It's not my time. My kids still need me. And the next thing I know, I'm back in the operating room, and Jesus walks in, and Jesus comes in as my best friend, not as like bow down to me, confess your sins, pray to me. No, Jesus came in as my best friend. I knew he was there to help me. The operating room lit up with this beautiful golden white light. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up in post-op, and my 45-minute procedure had turned into a 3.5-hour emergency surgery because they had ruptured my uterus in multiple places and missed my artery by literally a millimeter.
Oh my God. That's insane.
It is insane. And, 3 days later, the surgeon came in and said, you shouldn't be here. And I knew I shouldn't be there. And at one point in time, once again, these are so vivid. They're more vivid than this conversation that you and I are having. I knew that I had been protected, and that at some level, my soul had cried out for help, or a miracle, as we might call it. And it happened.
So do you feel now in hindsight that was a part of your mission? Because you had mentioned that pit in your stomach leading up to that. And so if, let's say, you had trusted that intuitive, message you were getting and not done the surgery, would you have not had the near-death experience? I know you don't know that, but now in hindsight, does it feel like that was a part of your mission to go through that?
Well, I like to say, I think we can do things in life the easy way or the hard way. And for some reason, I was going to do it the hard way, I guess. But I think the universe had been tapping me on my shoulder and wanting to get my attention for decades at that point in my life, from my grandparents who had passed to other messages to my first near-death experience. So I don't think I had to do it the hard way. I think had I turned and started listening to my calling, I could have probably avoided it.
And so then you mentioned your first one was in 2000 and your second one was 2006, right?
Yeah.
And so there's 6 years there. Do you feel like you were getting messages that you were kind of ignoring and keeping secret during those 6 years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I lived, my husband was not supportive of this. And, in his defense, he didn't marry a medium. When I was 23 and I got married, I didn't know I was a medium, Yeah. And so, there was a lot just almost for, peace and harmony, that it was I just didn't talk about what I knew. And I certainly would have never given someone a reading or a message. It just didn't feel, safe for me at that point in time.
And so do you feel like you were getting messages that you wished you could give to people? Things you wish you could tell people?
Yeah. Yes, there were certainly things that I had thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if they know, or if they could know, but it was also at that point in my life, like I said, after this second near-death experience, it took me 4 months to get back to 80%. My body was just destroyed, after that point in time. And then I'm going into motherhood with 3 young kids, not feeling well. So in that way, it made it easy for me to ignore it, because you kind of go, even if you're healthy and you have 3 kids that age, you're a little bit in survival mode, Yeah. And so it was easy for me. Besides, also, it wasn't supported or even kind of condoned. So it was easy for me to shove it back into the closet again.
Gosh. Yeah, easy, quote unquote. I feel like that had to be an emotional toll there, though, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You seem like a person who wants to share love and light and happiness, and to keep that to yourself seems like a travesty, kind of, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's probably why the marriage had to end.
Yeah. And so then you had a third one, and this is kind of the catalyst to everything.
Yep, this is the one where I literally, for people who like numbers, it's November 1st, 2011, so 11/1/11. I was up, I know, right? I was up on a ladder here in this house. It has 14-foot ceilings, and about 12 feet off the ground, I have battery-operated candles. So I told my younger 2 kids that were home, they were 5 and 8 at the time. My oldest was 10 and at school. I said, after I put this candle, back up. We're going to go get your sister. And I remember climbing up the ladder. I remember feeling it start to shift. And I immediately thought, this is going to hurt. And the next thing I know, I was ripped out of my body, not in a painful way, but in a fast way, like bungee cord fast, turned around, facing my body and the ladder suspended in the air, like a freeze frame in a movie. And I was standing with these 3 people. I didn't know them, but they felt like lifelong friends, family. I felt like I'd known them forever. It was an Asian man, an Egyptian woman, and a Hawaiian man. And as I was standing there with them, they said to me, they said, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I was trying to understand how I had forever to decide what I wanted to do when I knew my body was going to hit the floor in a second. And it just wasn't making sense to me, but I was in that timeless space. I was feeling that bliss. As I looked at my body in the ladder, I saw this angel come in, a different angel than my first near-death experience. And this angel was dressed in red and gold. And the moment that I saw this angel, I knew it was here to either take me home or shift something so that I could stay. And then I saw my younger 2 kids in the kitchen. And when I noticed them and when I really saw them and got pulled into them, I really understood that I needed to stay. But as I made that decision, I was then told, okay, but you need to go back and you need to do your mediumship and you need to help people in the way that you can help them. I mean, there were like conditions now for me to agree to come back. They told me that my marriage would most likely end in divorce and that there would be more trauma ahead. So I remember standing in this amazing, peaceful, loving realm, getting told like, yeah, you can go back, but they weren't kidding. They weren't saying it's going to be rainbows and unicorns and everything is going to be perfect. They said it's going to be hard. And this is kind of what it's going to look like. And I still remember being there and saying, okay, send me back. And coming back in. So what happened was I ended up falling off the ladder. I hit the back of my head on the corner of my granite island. So I had a 5.5-inch skull fracture. I had a brain bleed. I lost my equilibrium, my taste, my smell, and part of my hearing. But what happened was I literally survived the fall by 1/2 inch because I missed my brainstem by 1/2 inch. And that was how much the angel had moved my head to make the difference of me going home or staying that time.
Oh my God. And so you said your kids are in the kitchen and now they discovered you? They're the ones who...
they actually watched it happen. They actually watched.
Oh, man.
Yeah. My 5-year-old said to me, I know why your head got hurt so bad because it bounced like a basketball when you hit the floor. I mean, like he vividly saw it, you know? And so what happens is I end up getting to the hospital. I'm in ICU, you know, I've got the brain bleed. Luckily it stopped on its own, so I didn't have to have surgery. I have a lot of trauma, literally traumatic brain injury, right? I get home from the hospital. So we're probably like 10 days later, I'm at the house, still having so many physical complications. So now we're in November. We get through Christmas and then January comes and my son, who was 5 years old, he was really starting to get depressed because he said, we thought he had tried to call 911 and it hadn't gone through. But my daughter Sophie's call had gone through. And he starts saying, I didn't need to be there to help you. I didn't do anything. And we would say, well, Josh, you opened the door for the policeman, like you did help. And he'd say, no, my call didn't go through. So the end of January 2012, my grandfather, who had passed away when I was 12 years old, came through to me in this significant visit. And he started talking to me about my accident. And he started talking to me about my son. They've never walked this earth at the same time. And he said to me, was talking about him being good with electronics. And then he said, you need to get the 911 recording. There's something on there you should know. And I was just like, I didn't even know I could get the 911 recording. So I went down and I ordered it. It took a couple weeks to come in. I started playing it and I heard them say, 911, what's your recording? And in his little broken voice, my son said, Sophie, what do I say? And he laid the phone down. So for the next minute and a half, you can hear the 911 operators trying to get their attention. You can hear the kids talking in the background. My son tells my daughter, I'm going to push the house alarm panic button. She says, hold on, let me try calling 911. She hangs up the phone and she calls, and then there's a second call with her that went through. So they
Oh my
both
gosh.
ended up. Now, had my grandfather, when you talk about life-changing, right? That was life-changing because my son was 5. He was depressed. He felt like he hadn't helped me. I had no information on how I could help him. My grandfather from the other side came through and gave me life-changing information for him.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You said he was 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a seminal moment right there. Like that's a powerless, I tried and failed,
Oh,
kind
he
of
was
a,
embodying it. And we would say, you open the door, like everyone, we're trying so hard to lift him up. But literally, when he came home from kindergarten that day, and I said, Josh, I said, your call went through. Help was coming. It was like I lifted this 10,000-pound weight off this 5-year-old little boy, which I had no idea how to do that without the help of my grandfather.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what would have. Yeah. I mean, that would have been quite a bit of processing and, maybe therapy later on in life, and man, yeah, my son, I have a 9-year-old and he would never, I don't think he'd ever forgive himself really fully, with, if that similar situation had happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's astonishing, honestly.
Yeah.
And so now do you go to this timeless bliss kind of spiritual place ever now again, or is that only kind of a near-death experience type place?
So think of it a little bit like the ocean. I don't get as deep as I did that time because I got really deep in those near-death experiences. But with my work, I get to, snorkel or scuba dive a little bit, but I don't go into the level of the depth that I really got to experience in those near-death experiences.
No, that's a great metaphor. Yeah, it's almost like the training yourself for that. And that's what's so cool about it to me too, is because I'm more, analytical and scientific, if you will. And so it's like I don't know if you've heard of Rudolf Steiner. There's a lot of his work and he talks about developing your spiritual senses and things like that. And so that to me is like astonishing that you would kind of get thrust into a situation where your spiritual senses have been developed, whether you like it or not.
Well, we know that about 80% of people who have near-death experiences come back with heightened ESP, psychic abilities, mediumship. It's almost like you can't be that close and touch it and not come back a changed person. We also know 80% of them, their marriages end in divorce because you do come back a changed person. And so there's a lot that goes along with this. And I would say some people come back depressed because they wanted to stay and they were told they couldn't. And they have to go through that. So it is a beautiful opportunity. It also comes with some complications.
Yeah, I guess that's a perfect segue because I am curious. We talked about this before we started recording. I'm curious about the idea of suicide. Mm-hmm. And, we just recently had a thing in Gilbert here, which I don't know if you are familiar with, but there was a gentleman, homeless man apparently, who shot himself and killed himself inside of a Starbucks right at 202 in Santan Village. Mm. And so it's just like incredibly sad, and so when we talk about, the spiritual world, people being happy when they move on, which is obviously something that people want to hear. How do we kind of differentiate the fact that dying would be better than living?
Right. Okay. So suicide, I've had that in my life. A year ago, my life partner transitioned by suicide. So I'm very much aware of that from a personal level. And I had worked with clients who've had loved ones transition by that for years before that actually touched my life in that way. And so what I can tell you is that as far as spirit world goes, no matter how you come home, you're going to be loved and welcomed home, right? And I've never had anyone come through in a reading that was actually in their right mind and in who they are when they transition by suicide. What spirit world has told me is that anytime there is an opening in the soul to get help, to have somebody open the door and smile at you, to have a kind word, to receive the text. Anytime there is an opening, the whole universe is working to keep you here because they know that your soul came here with a mission, with a plan and lessons that you wanted to learn. So it's not that it is it's not the easy way out, because we've chosen issues and things we want to learn while we're here in our human life, and we still have to come back. We get to repeat the course at a later time. So it's not that the slate is just complete, check the box, you completed it. You did not complete it. But at the same time, you do get welcomed and loved into that heavenly realm with compassion and light. It's kind of like dropping out of high school. You still get to go to graduation. You still get to go to your friend's party, but you don't get the diploma, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. And so how has I'm assuming you've talked to your loved one who passed away then, and how has potentially that conversation shifted your place of acceptance or understanding, or did you already have an acceptance and understanding of that as it was happening?
I already knew, because I had worked as a medium for quite a few years, that if somebody transitioned that way, that they were going to be met with love and light and compassion. What I wasn't prepared for was actually I found out from him that he had transitioned. So I knew he had had depression, and there had been some periods in time where he would just turn off his phone and his computer for a couple of days and sleep through it, and then kind of reemerge. And I had been reaching out to him and he wasn't responding. I drove by his house. His car was parked out there. His older daughter was living with him. She didn't want to meet me. So I didn't want to knock on the door, but I saw his car and her car, and I said, okay, he must be okay. He's having one of those moments. And we had a party we were supposed to go to. He didn't go, which I wasn't surprised, because I figured he was in one of those time periods. But at the end of the night, when I came home, I was in my bathroom getting ready for bed, and I actually felt him come in behind me. I heard him say to me, "You sure are beautiful," because he would always tell me that. And I just felt my body starting to give out, because I knew this was mediumship, and I had not been told he had transitioned at that point in time. I was able to make it to my bed, where I just collapsed, and I felt him lay down behind me. He put his arm over me and he said, "I wanted to be the one to tell you." And so that was how I actually found out that he had transitioned by suicide.
Man. Wow, that's deep. That's deep. I couldn't imagine finding out in that way. Like, yikes. So this type of experience you're describing sounds to me, and I don't know if this is the best terminology to use, but like a ghost. So someone that's able to kind of like communicate with you. And you can correct me obviously in a second, but I'm curious, like, is there a existence that someone has when they move on that is in that state for a while, that then no longer exists in that state, and like kind of like moves on and is no longer visiting you anymore? Or is it always available to visit?
Yeah, so it's always available to visit. I wouldn't use the term ghost, because to me, ghosts haven't stepped into the light yet. They're in between. They're in between earth realm and heaven realm. Whereas his energy was already in the light, just like the communication from loved ones in spirit that I do during mediumship. So ghost doesn't accurately describe it the way that I know it. His spirit was already in the light and love, and he was coming back to share with me that information.
And why might someone be stuck between earth and the heavenly realm?
Yeah, so it's really going to have to do with our human thought process and our human mindset. So sometimes people who are very religious get stuck because they feel like they didn't live a good enough life. They're going to be judged. They're going to get damned to hell, or, energy around that. Other times, sometimes if somebody transitions, and I want to say this, it's rare to be in ghost form. Most people go right into the light. You got to think about all the people who love you, your angels and your life guides that are waiting right there to welcome you home. You know what I mean? And to help guide you home. So it's not common. That ghost type energy is very uncommon. But what I would say is usually we get stuck because of fear, or people will get stuck because maybe they transitioned so quickly and so unexpectedly that it was almost a little disorienting to them.
And then it just kind of takes them a while. I mean, they still have spiritual guides, right? So, I mean, they're still going to like kind of get pulled out of that place at some point.
Yeah, they still have guides, loved ones, and spirit angels that are always holding the light and the space to welcome them home. They also still have free will, though. They can choose to not walk into the light if they don't want to. So although they're getting coaxed and ushered and all of that, they still have some free will there.
Makes sense. And so there's this notion that we choose our lives in the spiritual world. Can you illuminate that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a pre-recorded course on my website about this. It's about the soul plan and the soul agreement. So what happens is before we come to planet Earth, we actually sit down and we choose who we want to be on our team. I want you to think about this as like a video game, right? We sit down and we say, I want to take this mission. I'm going to choose you as my mom, you as my brother. And we start picking out who's going in. We have conversations with our life guides. We choose who we want our life guide to be, and we pick our guardian angel. So we are coming in knowing on a soul level that we are wanting these missions. We are wanting these lessons. These are some of the experiences that we want. This would be the blueprint of our life. Now, my understanding from spirit is it's about 60 to 70% complete, and then you have 30 to 40% free will once you get here. So you're not ever forced to be here on a soul level. No one is accidentally on planet Earth. Even if you tell me my mom was 15 when she got pregnant with me, I'm an accident. The answer is no, you're not. That's just how your soul chose to come to planet Earth this time. There's no one here by accident. So we do have a planning and we do have an understanding. I like to compare this to my third near-death experience when I'm standing with my life guides and they said, okay, but if you go back, your marriage is going to end in divorce and you have more trauma coming. And they were trying to give me an education on what was coming. And I remember being like, okay, yeah, it'll be fine. Send me in, right? And they were really trying to have this conversation with me. So there is conversation, there is discussion, there is preparedness. They will tell you like, hey, this is like too aggressive of a plan. We need to scale this back, save some for the next lifetime, But we really do come in with a blueprint for our lives and ideas. And people say, why would I have chosen, whoever in my life? They've been horrible to me. You chose them because on a soul level, you two are actually really good friends. And they said, okay, I'm going to play this really hard part with you so that you can learn whatever the blank is, fill in the blank. You can learn self-love. You can learn your worth. You can learn whatever to overcome your fears. And so on a soul level, you and that person are actually always only in a place of love. But that's why they would choose to play a role in your life that would be really challenging.
And is that something that you intuitively pick up on, that you're able to help people with? Because that larger perspective of getting like, okay, why would my child come into this world and die at age 8 with cancer? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's a lot of things that are really hard for these parents to deal with. And I know, like I said before that we started recording, the fact that you're in front of these people having real live conversations, helping them to see this larger perspective of how it's all okay and they chose this in some way. And so I guess what is the larger perspective you're able to share with some people in those cases?
Yeah. That is always the most challenging group for me, because even I will just tell you, as a parent, as a mom, I'm like, really, how is this okay? I don't think this is okay. I don't. But when I go up to the soul level, and even with my life partner transition, on the human level, I don't find the peace in it. On the soul level, I find the peace in it. So I want to speak to that because I can put words on that, but it's similar to how it is with everyone. Okay. So as I had to do this deep dive as to why did this happen? How could this happen? What I actually found out was that he stayed longer on this planet to have the opportunity to love me and for me to be able to feel that kind of love. I had never felt that kind of love in my 25-year marriage. And so what happened was that even though it would be in the human story, a tragic ending, cut way too soon, there was a gift on a soul level that I received from him, which was a kind of love that I didn't even know existed. And so because of that, my soul would agree to go through this to feel that type of love.
Wow. Yeah. Jeez.
And so with parents, it's different. depending on, we don't know, like I really got to be with someone in a reading to look at the soul plan because they're all different. And I know that we all have about 5 exit points in this life. So, sometimes people take the first one, the middle one, the last one. I mean, it depends on what's going on with your soul and the situation and which one ends up being the best one for you.
Yeah. So I'm very curious about this thing because I've talked with Farah about this as well, another medium that we both know. And she mentions that everyone who has ever existed still exists, basically. Mm-hmm. And so I had this kind of distinction in my head that I was very curious at how someone's soul could exist and continue going into new personalities or bodies, if you will, but also their like personality from that life exists separately. Is that like correct?
Yes. And actually, I'm so happy you asked me that because this is one of my very favorite questions to answer. And I love to always use this picture behind me. Well, you can't tell, but this actually reminds me of the light in heaven. It's got sparkles on it, silver and gold. I want you to think of this picture as your soul. And I want you to know that what happens is every time we decide to come back into planet Earth, our soul creates another ray of light, just like this does behind me. So the version of you that is existing today will exist throughout all of time and all of eternity. And when your soul chooses to come back in, you create a new ray of light.
Wow. That's a really cool metaphor to think about. Mm-hmm. They would all exist at that central point still.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Jeez. So, I'm kind of curious about anyone who might think, again, I know you said you don't really care if people believe or not, so I'm going to kind of shift a little bit, but I'm curious about people that might think it's scary. People that might think that, what we're communicating with is not okay. Like religious people, I think would be a big one here. But how you might deal with anybody who's kind of scared of communicating with the dead,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, they're not dead. There's no such thing as death. There's just life and life and life and life, But here's the thing. Everyone is allowed to, I just want to tell you, I value everyone's belief system. They're allowed to think whatever they want to think. They're allowed to feel that way. It's okay. I don't know their soul's plan. I don't know why they're choosing that belief system for this lifetime and what they want to learn from it. So it's never a challenge for me. What I will tell you, when I work, my angels are there. I work with Jesus. I have an intention that everything that comes through is in light and love and for this person's highest good. So for me, it's never scary because I know I'm going in with my team. I know that they're filtering the information. I think what it is really people who are more like their mindset is kind of stuck. And so here's the thing. Whether or not you want to connect with your loved ones in spirit, they're still connected to you. They're still loving on you and they're still in a relationship with you. What you choose to do with that on this human side of it is very individual. So, I don't find it scary, obviously, because I do this all day. But what I will tell you is it's not natural because it's not natural on a soul level. Our soul knows that we are connected to these experiences and these people, these souls forever, literally all of eternity. And we are born, every single one of us has the ability to be a psychic, a medium, and have these communications. It's like our natural gift of communication. So the idea that it's scary to me is a man-made idea that was used to control people from making their own connections.
Yeah, I love that. And so do you have any advice on developing their abilities outside of almost dying?
Yeah. Yes, I do. We have different mediums that teach different courses. Right now, I'm teaching a life guide course on how to connect with your life guide. So, find some mediums that you like, start following them, see if they have courses. I would say everyone does have this ability. If you're scared of your connection to your loved ones still, in a way, it's almost like you're scared of yourself. Because they are still a part of you and you're still a part of them, even though they're not connected to their body anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we talked about creating new rays on the sunshine, you being the sunshine, your soul in the middle, creating new rays. At what point, I guess, in this, world that you have glimpsed would be what's the purpose? When do we finish?
Yeah.
I know maybe finish is not the right word, but
Right. Well, here's what I would say. It's always about the soul's evolution and the soul's journey. So think about your favorite vacation spot, wherever that is, right? After being there for about 200 years or 300 years, you're probably going to be like, is there a new beach? Is there a new restaurant? Can we do something different tonight? Right. And that's kind of this heavenly realm. It's perfect. It's amazing, but it doesn't have the contrast that planet Earth has. So we can't learn there the same way we learn here. It's like taking driver's ed, sitting in a simulator versus getting in a car and driving it on the freeway. Those are two very different things, right? And so what happens is we choose to, hey, I want to go drive the car. I want to have the experience of accelerating and right turns and left turns and whatever that's going to be. So after we've been there for a while, knowing that we are eternal beings and that this lifetime here on earth, if you live to be 100, you're just here for the blink of an eye. We're going to say, hey, I want to go have that experience. It's a journey. It's fun. It's a lesson. And that's really why our souls choose to come here.
And so do people, I guess, ascend and become angels, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, our souls are always wanting to grow and evolve, right? So there are masters, there's Buddha, there's Jesus. I mean, on and on and on, right? There are souls that have had incarnations billions of times. So obviously they've learned more than a soul that's only come in a few thousand times, right? But I don't know that there is. I think we're being human when we say like, oh, I'm going to be a master. I'm going to be like, I think that's a human way of looking at it. I think a soul way of looking at it is expansiveness. I want to expand to be the whole universe. You know what I mean? But not out of a place of, so that you'll look at me and call me a master, but more of like the experience of it so that I actually know and feel and can understand everything that there is to know and feel and understand.
So that'd be kind of almost like a moving on type experience then, would be like expanding so much so to the point of being interconnected with everything, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can see that. And so will you share any more stories that you can regarding helping people? Because this to me is just mind blowing. Like, I'm going to real quick give a side note, for anybody who doesn't know, these readings are really cool. I just watched one, over the past couple of days of researching you and watching Michelle be on a call with like 20 different people, all grieving parents. You can see the real sad energy, and her to just kind of go on, this run of connecting with each person, and maybe not each person, but a lot of different people, and helping them to understand, or just give little tips and hints and feelings and suggestions and things that might guide them in a direction towards healing. And so, yeah, you've got to have a plethora of stories of helping people with this stuff. And I just would love to hear a few more.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most touching ones that really, when I'm in a reading, I don't usually get choked up. My job is to stay a clear channel so that I can get the best information through. But this was a couple years ago, and I was at someone's house. They had about 20 people there, and I was doing a group reading. And I get to this one lady, and she was an ICU nurse. I didn't know her. Her baby had transitioned at 2 days old. And so what happened was the baby came through, and obviously she was grieving. She had to make the decision to pull the life support. She was an ICU nurse. She felt like she should have been able to save this baby, make a different decision. And the baby came in from such a beautiful space and said, "You're looking at this all wrong. I grew for 9 months just to have 2 days with you on planet Earth." And it changed everything, because it tells us that baby knew it wasn't coming to live 100 years, but it did 9 months of growth and being here just to be with her for those 2 days. And when we see a story like that, it doesn't take away the grief, but it shifts the perspective.
Yeah. And so do you think that the way you live your daily life has had a big dramatic change from viewing the spiritual world and having these belief systems?
Absolutely. I'm really Not that I don't buy into my human story. I do. I'm a mom. Like I've got to get groceries, what the dog's sick, whatever, right? Like I do buy into my human stories. But the beauty of what I get to do is I now regularly can take it up to the soul level and say, why is that situation happening? If somebody is having a physical illness, I can say, what is the energy behind it? It's not random. There's an emotion. Why did they get pancreatic cancer? What are they so resentful about that they've never talked about, right? So I can see the bigger picture, which actually makes navigating this life easier because I can elevate to that frequency. And like I said, very often in the human form, even with my life partner's transition, I didn't ever find the peace I wanted in the fact that he transitioned by suicide. I don't know that that's something that human Michelle will ever be like peaceful with. But when I take it to the soul level, I can see the peace, I can see the beauty in it, and I can see that he and I are connected for eternity.
Mm. Yeah. I love the idea of kind of being forced to house both, like you have to hold the pain of that a little bit. It's part of your human mission, if you will, but you can also kind of, take it to the soul level and find a place of acceptance and kind of continue to get through each day, regardless of the pain.
For sure. I have not found a way to bypass the human grief. If I had, I would. But even with the gifts and the knowledge that I have, you can't bypass grief. There's only one way through it, and that's through it.
And that's a powerful message, because I think a lot of people are looking for, obviously the quick fix and looking for the solution, looking to let go entirely. And I don't really think that's how it works either. It's more of an integration, and if anything, than Absolutely. Shedding away, emotions,
Right. And it doesn't mean that you can't live a full life and that you can't be happy again. Our loved ones in spirit, one of the things, I can't tell you how many clients come to me and feel like they shouldn't laugh, that they feel guilty when they're happy, that they're, because their loved one passed prematurely or isn't here to experience it with them. And it's interesting to me because their loved ones are like, are you kidding me? I haven't stopped living. I'm laughing. I'm doing what I want to do. You need to go live and laugh and do what you want to do. So just giving yourself permission that, yes, your loved one is spirit, but they're not sitting alone on a park bench waiting for you for the next 50 years. They are living, evolving, loving, laughing, and they want us to do the same thing while we're here.
Yeah, and that's why I think there should almost be a narrative shift, because you don't even use the word death. I've noticed you use the word transition, which is great. You know what I mean? And so there's this whole narrative shift around the fact that it's not actually, that bad of a thing. It's actually okay. And so, not letting it get so heavy, if you will, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just one of the things I love to share with people is that the relationship and the communication has continued on. It's different. They're not in their body anymore. And I'm with you. I want them in their body. Like I miss them being in their body, but it actually hasn't ended our relationship, our connection, our communication. It's going to look different. We've got to learn to speak a new language. We've got to learn our signs. We've got to learn that when we feel them in the room, it's because they're really right here in the room. But they haven't been severed out of our life until we get to that heavenly realm.
And so what do you think that I guess this is a tough question, but what do you think that they would want for us? I like to think about my answer. So this is where potential comes in. So I'll just give a caveat real quick. Sometimes I used to do this really, really big long trail runs, or, you just take on a big, huge pile of work. And I always like to think to myself, as something that empowers me, is that my ancestors, anybody who is no longer here, wants me to succeed, wants me to finish, wants me to reach my potential, because they no longer have the chance to necessarily. Like they had their chance on earth, now it's my turn, and I should take full advantage of it. Yeah. And so I'm always curious, what is the larger purpose? What is the, if there's any signs of what the larger purpose is, what they would want for us. Is it happiness? Unconditional love, it could be on that list, or happiness, or what is it?
It's absolutely what you're feeling. They want us to live every moment while we're here. And they want us to live it and be in it and be present. And yes, chase your dreams, chase your goals, and when you're sad, feel it, because that's part of your human experience too. But they are rooting us on from the other side to fulfill our missions, to learn our lessons, to be present. Hey, this lifetime, Even if you're here 100 years, it's fast. It is fast. And you don't want to miss it. I might come back again in the future, but I'm not coming back as Michelle at this point in time in this lifetime. It will be a different storyline. And so truly, whether you believe in past lives or not, you really literally are only living this lifetime once. So you've got to make the most of it.
Absolutely. And so a life coach is also on your list of skills. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on why people would not be reaching their potential. What might be standing in their way that you're seeing come up?
Yeah, it's the number one human problem for everyone with everything. False stories that we believe are true. So when you're not living up to your potential, or even when people are transitioning, and I'll speak for my situation, when he transitioned by suicide, he was believing a story that wasn't real, whatever that story was that was speaking to him that day, right? And if I'm not going to believe in my potential, it's because I'm telling myself a story. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm whatever. We have different stories, that we like to buy into. The kid in third grade told me I was dumb, so I must be dumb. I mean, it could be a trauma, or it could be just a story someone has told you that you've bought into. But that's what limits our potential. It truly is the story we're telling ourselves.
I love that. That's 100% what I agree, and what I've seen talked about in several of my podcasts as well. So that was a perfect answer. And so then I'm curious, on your list as well is intuitive healing. So this is something that's very intriguing to me. So then those stories would then be tied to some sort of energy, which would then potentially be tied to a physical illness. Is that something that you are able to feel or see, or how is that something that you have a relationship with?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the above. So what I have found is that as people manifest physical illnesses, it's not that they're not real. It's not that there's not something physical going on and you need to go to a doctor. Absolutely. Do all of those things. But what preceded the physical illness is an emotional thought, idea, pain, trauma that was never dealt with. And so it started causing resentment or anger or wounding or whatever that is. We have an energy body that surrounds our physical human body. And as that carries that wound for decades or however long it's been, because you've decided not to talk about it, not to address it, try to forget about it, it starts to create a physical ailment. So yes, we start having true physical issues that we need medication or whatever for, but underneath the physical is the emotional, mental, or spiritual issue that actually needs to be addressed for the true healing to occur.
And there's probably different ways that you would go about addressing that, but what would be some kind of ways that you might help someone to gain awareness of that or let go of that?
Yeah, so I do healing sessions, and I do like readings in that way for people. And really what that is, that's me tapping in with their soul team, finding kind of the issue. What is the trauma here? What are we looking at? And then start working with the healing energy. So I'm a channel for healing energy, so it'll just flow through me. I don't have to be in person. A lot of these I do over Zoom. And we start doing the energy work on it. Now, sometimes people need medical intervention too, because it's gotten to that point. The goal is to heal the emotional or mental side of it before it becomes a physical ailment.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. I mean, so you're kind of getting a feel for this from people, from their energy, like you said?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. The single most important thing we have to pay attention to is the story we're telling ourselves, because that is what creates the emotion, that creates the illness, that creates the limitation, that creates the lack of self-worth. What story are you telling yourself? That is the bottom line of so many things, right? Now, on a soul level, when we choose a body, my mom transitioned from breast cancer. So I knew I was choosing a body that had a higher chance of breast cancer, right? Genetically, there are things I knew as my soul chose to come in, but we really do work in the body, mind, spirit category. And so for me, coming in, I could say, okay, I might have a higher genetic disposition to this, but I still have my mind and my spirit. I can choose my thoughts. I can eat healthy, I can exercise, I can, there are ways to bypass that. It was never etched in stone. It was just a possibility that was more likely for me.
Yeah, I love that. And that's even kind of, ties into like some of the genetic stuff where it's like, genetics loads the gun, environments pulls the trigger. So it's like you come into this world with certain things that you're experiencing, but ultimately they don't have to really manifest, depending on how you kind of go about living your life, the environment you create within yourself.
Yeah.
So then that brings us to the question of past life wounds that we might bring in with us. So I'm very interested in hypnosis and like past life regressions and things like that. I don't know what sort of connection you might have to any of that stuff. But I'm curious if we do ever bring in like a past life fear of water because we drowned in a past life type of thing, like anything like that.
Yes. That's not uncommon to have something like that where you bring in something that you didn't have time to complete, or now you're afraid of it because on some level you remember passing that way, even though it might not be a conscious memory. Here's what I want to say though. Our soul is always whole. So our soul is never broken. There's not I hear people talk about your soul's been fragmented, and I'm like, what? What do you mean by that? Your soul is this sunlight behind me, this starburst, right? It's always whole. There might be a little place where we can fine tune it better and make it, like dust it off, but it's not broken. So yes, you could carry a fear in here of water or drowning because you drowned in a more recent life. But then it's your job and your knowing to say like, okay, now I've got to work on that. Now I've got to put some energy to that, some understanding to that, so that I'm not carrying that in this lifetime.
Yeah, that's huge. So I'm very curious about the spiritual world and this place of, so I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Newton's work. And there's a guy who life between lives, hypnosis, and would take people to the spiritual world. And they all would describe these incredibly similar experiences of like being pulled in through a tunnel. But here's the thing is that you mentioned as well, which was this like overwhelming feeling of belonging and acceptance and love. Yeah. And so like, it's just such a curious thing to me. Like where are we going where there's this place of overwhelming acceptance and love and belonging? Like, I don't fully understand that. Like, I know it's like a spiritual world that exists here, potentially overlaid over our realistic world. And so I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts of this really strong sensation of love, belonging, acceptance, and this potentially spiritual world. And is there anything beyond the spiritual world? I guess there's just like spiritual world and reality.
Right. I think there are many dimensions. I think there are multiple universes. I think it's very limiting to think that we're either at Earth or in that heavenly realm, because that's not it. Our souls are having multiple existences right now, even in this timeline. So here's what I will tell you. The majority of your soul right now is currently still in that heavenly realm. This part of you that is taught at having this human experience in the year 2024 is literally like the size of the fingernail on your little tiny pinky finger. It's like your soul is just dipping its finger in the water. The majority of you is still at home in that heavenly realm, but you're just like, oh, what does that feel like? Let me feel that. And so it's not that we're going there. We are, and yet most of us is already there. We're just having a little taste of this earth experience so we can learn and expand on it.
So do you feel like you've been given a message on your purpose, or that you have settled into this place of like day to day being present in the moment?
So for me, I mean, I know that because I have that memory from my third near-death experience, I know that there's a lot of stuff that's expected of me. I know that I have things to do here. I know that there are more things coming. And so with that being said, yes, like I know there's a lot coming, and yet all I can do is be present in the moment, because being present in the moment is actually the energy that drives our future, right? I can worry about the future, and am I missing my mission or my purpose? But now I'm putting worry energy out there, and it's truly much more productive to be present here now, focused on this interview with you, and then on to my reading after this, than it is for me to worry about the future.
Yeah. And so then I have to ask, I mean, I usually ask most of my guests, like, where do you see your business do you see your business going? Like, how do you grow this? How do you create or have the biggest impact that you could possibly have, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really just about reaching as many people as possible so that they know they have a choice in the way they see life and view life and show up in life. So I have a book that I'm working on right now. Some other opportunities coming out. I'm starting to teach. So I have a life guide course right now. In February, I'll be coming out with Connecting with Your Angels course. So for me, it's really like driving, because what I want is for people to do this for themselves. I love bookings. I love reading one-on-one with people. I mean, yes, please do that. But at the same time, my goal is for you to make your own connection and to help foster that.
Is there anything you could give us or glimpse us on what might be in there? Like perhaps a meditation is something that would be helping people. I'm just trying to think of my own knowledge. I feel like meditation would be a good way to connect, potentially journaling. Like what I don't want to give away all your secrets, but I'm curious.
No, those are good. And not just a meditation, but also I say, listen to binaural beats in either theta or delta wavelength. In the studies that I've done, when I'm getting information from spirit world, that's the brainwave that I'm in, theta or delta. So you can go to YouTube. There are thousands of them for free there, and just listen to it 10 minutes a day, longer if you can, right? It's the consistency that pays off over time. It's more important to do it a little bit every day than to do it for 5 hours on Sunday.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up theta and delta too. I'm huge into studying brainwaves. And so do you feel like, have you experienced being tired while you're down there? Are you kind of in a tired state when you're down there? Are you able to just be perfectly cognizant in like a lower brainwave state?
Yeah, I look just like I do right now. So the readings where I'm in theta and I'm getting all this information, I'm talking, my eyes are open, I'm doing all of this. It looks just like I do right now. It's just a matter of dropping my brainwaves to that frequency to get the information.
That is so cool. So do you have your own breathwork thing that you do? You kind of just think through it? Is it like a sacred place you go to in your mind, or?
Yeah, well, honestly, I've been doing this for so many years now that it's just training, that it's just like, I can just drop in like that. And so that's really what you want to do. You want to practice it enough that you get to the point where you can just drop in and get the information that you need and then come back out and share it. So it's like working out. It's like going for a run. You're not going to just wake up one morning and run a marathon. You're going to start training. You're going to start watching your diet. You're going to start doing all sorts of things differently if that's your goal. And that's kind of how mediumship or connection with your life guides, your angels is too.
So do you have any opinions then on other mediums, or we can I saw one of your talks or posts was about like the difference between empaths, like clairvoyant, psychic, medium and stuff, and so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on some of the other mediums, like Bashar or Esther Hicks or any of these people like that. If you have any thoughts at all on that stuff, because I'm interested in that stuff. I don't know what you think about it, and the difference between some of the reading styles that people are utilizing.
I love all of that. They're basically channels. So they're connecting to different channels. They're connecting to ET channel for Bashar. They're connecting to higher consciousness for Abraham Hicks. Mediums are tending to connect to your loved ones in spirit channel. But, we have people who channel the archangels, and you can basically channel anything. It's all done. It's all really mediumship. It's just, what are you focused on in the moment?
Yeah. So then, and I hate to go to a dark place, but I have to ask, I'm curious then, do you ever think that there's any entities that anybody channels that pretends it's a different entity?
It's possible. It would depend on the medium. It would depend on, it's so unique because I think that we all work differently. I don't, and are there darker energies on planet Earth? Absolutely. Look around. You know what I mean? But it's not something that I worry about or I connect with or that I've ever had the experience of. But do I think it's possible? Yes.
That's awesome. It's awesome. You've never had a negative experience, like just awesome connections with spirits that have been nice to you. And wow, that's that's honestly crazy to imagine. Like, because even the experience you described, being in the bathroom and having your beloved come and, say that to you is like, it almost gave me chills, like imagining that actually happening but you had already had that experience with knowing what a mediumship connection felt like, knowing that like, you're receiving this message and it wasn't anything harmful or scary. And like, that's got to be something that a lot of other people wish they could have. I was watching your video, the one where you were coaching or helping the people that were all healing. And it was just like, they were all wanting so bad to, like, I couldn't imagine living my life looking for a connection, and is that something that you like find yourself doing still? Is like, you're like connecting with your grandpa, connecting with anybody who's passed away, and kind of just like having your sensory, acuity set on seeing anything that might be a sign?
Yeah. I mean, it's my life, right? So it's kind of, in a way, mediumship, it's like, but I don't know, I'm going to say being a nun or being a priest. It's just your lifestyle. Like I don't, probably like police officers or nurses or doctors, they don't come home and leave it at work, right? If there was an accident, they'd probably still pull over and help, and they would, you know what I mean? So it's almost like, yes, it's a part of me. No, I'm not always walking around reading people. That's not how I work. But at the same time, I can't take that part out of me, because it's like telling me, oh, I'm at the grocery store. I'm not a mom right now. It doesn't matter where I am. I'm always a mom.
Yeah. Have you ever then, actually Farah told me about something that she'd experienced with witnessing someone's energy that seemed suicidal. Have you ever just like been out and about and experienced like, okay, I have to say this to this person, even though it might be like a weird, scenario, or like, they don't know me and this is not exactly the setting, but I have to say this?
Yeah. Occasionally I try to steer away from that, but if I am really feeling pushed by spirit, I will do that. I think Farah does that a lot more often than I do.
She's crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, that's like such an intense thing to take on. You're just like, nope, I got to help this person right now.
Well, you don't.
Oh my gosh.
Here's the thing. And when you're in that situation, you don't have a choice, right? I don't want to compare it to as much like being in the trauma room, but when you're in the trauma room and you're a surgeon, you're going to do what you need to do. And that's the same thing. It's like when she's in that situation, or if I'm in that situation and I get pushed by spirit and I know this needs to happen now, it's because there's something bigger than me at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what is your favorite way of delivering this helpful information to people?
Yeah. Well, I love doing classes. I love, my gallery readings are good because we get a lot of information that is also practical to life during that. Some of it will be coming out in my book, life coaching. I mean, I love the people connection.
I'm excited to read your book. Do you know when that's coming out?
I have 2 agents interested in it right now, so we will see where it goes. So hopefully I'll have more information in the next couple months. But
that's crazy. Are you gonna have it ghostwritten, or are you gonna write it yourself?
No, I've written it.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah, I've add some in there. I've had an editor to help me with it, but no, it's I've been doing the writing. So
is there any messages in there that are like take home messages that we haven't really touched on that you think would be great to mention?
I think we should wrap up with this. Your perspective is everything. It creates your reality. It creates your emotion. It keeps you healthy physically, mentally, spiritually, right? And so I think that is always the biggest thing I want to tell people. Your perspective is your free will, right? Mm-hmm. You have the choice to look at the flat tire as it ruined your day, or it saved your life, or I don't know what it did, but I'm fine, right? Your perception is your free will. And so that's your free will in action. And I always suggest use it to the best of your ability to cultivate the story that moves you forward.
Powerfully said. Very powerfully said. And that's honestly what I think is one of your superpowers as well, is just delivering perspective shifts constantly. People get stuck in their stories. You deliver perspective shifts, whether it's through the random facts you get from your readings, or just from your overall knowledge of grief and spiritual, purpose, if you will. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious then where people can find you.
Yes, on my website, michelleclare.net. You can book readings there. You can see upcoming events. If you're in the Phoenix area, I do have local in-person events.
Perfect. And she also, on YouTube, has some of those gallery readings, which I recommend. So I'll leave some of those in the show notes. Make sure people can find you. Make sure people can see what it is you're doing. This is something that is incredibly awesome, and I think just empowering. Like I said, I was incredibly touched watching. You guys don't understand what it's like watching 20 different people in grief looking to connect with their loved ones and be able to talk to Michelle and within 5 minutes feel, even a semblance of relief, some of them full relief. It's crazy. Wow. So thank you for the work you're doing, and we'll definitely keep an eye on what you do and where your business grows and your path.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to connect with you today.